Okay. All right. All right, guys. Welcome to Brass Tack Bodybuilding. This is the first episode here. You guys know who I am, Sebastian Burka. I'm here with Adam Katz, good friend of mine. I'll let him introduce himself. Tell me a little bit about yourself, Adam.
Well, as Sebastian just said, my name is Adam Katz. I also go by Coach Katz on TikTok and Instagram. Um, we basically do the same thing. We both are bodybuilders, online coaches. I go to school. I'm in my last year of college right now, so it's just another thing that I have on top of my plate. And hopefully, this podcast is here as a platform to educate people who are, coming up in bodybuilding, whether you want to be a bodybuilder or a coach or anything like that, as well as obviously, be entertaining as well. So that's just a
What are
little
you
bit.
what are you at school for again? What are you studying?
Exercise physiology.
Okay.
So
Cool,
basically
cool.
how the body works on a chemical level and all the systems, how they all work together. And also it's like an emphasis in exercise. So it's just going to help me with not only just my knowledge with bodybuilding, but mainly as a credential also to show
Okay,
the.
so I mean right off the start that already brings up something that just comes to my head. You went to school, you went to college, obviously didn't go to college. I know there's a lot of people out there that constantly ask, do you think it's worth it, to go to school, to go to college, to become a coach? I think the obvious answer is like, no, you don't. But do you think it has helped you? And also, since you're the one in school, do you wish you would have majored in something else? Do you think there would have been something better than what you majored in to, go into coaching? What would you, advise somebody trying to get in that, what direction should they go? And if they want to go to school just to learn more to get into coaching?
Right. I definitely do not think that college is necessary for being successful in general, but even more specifically for bodybuilding coaching. You don't really learn that much about bodybuilding. Like, of course, you're going to learn the basics a little step further than what you learned in high school in terms of like anatomy and physiology. Like, you learn about how muscles actually contract, how the nervous system and on cellular level, how things work. You learn about hormones. So, on a basic level, it is beneficial to go to college to learn these things, and I think you will learn a little bit better and get a more overall comprehensive understanding of physiology and biology when you go to school versus learning something online. You can definitely learn a lot on YouTube and from online courses and from mentors, things like that. So I would say that college isn't necessary, but it can definitely be helpful when it comes to knowledge, in bodybuilding and as a coach. If I could go back to when I was 18, going into college, I definitely would have done this major that I'm in right now. I've changed my major 3 times, went from like nutrition to a bunch of things. So I would definitely have done just this major and probably would have been graduated by now. But if I could have gone back and switched my major to something else, I don't think I really would have majored in anything else, just because majoring in like business, for example, could be beneficial. You'll learn about, I don't know very much about business to a certain degree, some level, but you can definitely learn more textbook stuff about business and finance and accounting or whatever it is that you want to learn about if your goal is purely just wealth and to make money in that direction. But I don't think it's necessary even to be successful in the business field to go to college.
No, I don't know. Absolutely fucking not. I don't think majority of fucking, people who are multimillionaires or have
Yeah.
successful businesses ever went to school to learn how to do it. I think that's kind of just, wasting your time in that aspect if you want to,
Yeah.
whatever you're doing in business, although coaching is a business, but you obviously have the aspect of, gaining knowledge towards certain aspects of, bodybuilding and coaching. So you would say, anybody going that wants to pursue school for coaching, that the best degree to, the best thing to study would be exercise physiology.
Anything in that realm, anything that has to do with the human body. So you're really going to learn all the same stuff, whether your major is like biology or physiology. They're very similar. My major is specifically physiology with an emphasis in exercise. Let's call it exercise physiology. But I've taken other classes, whether it's microcellular biology, and you just kind of get a full picture. So I would definitely say majoring in, if you want to go to college, if your parents are paying for it, which a lot of people that go to college, their parents do pay for it, then, taking a free ride to college where they're paying for it, you're not. I'd say you might as well if you don't already have something going for you. If you're in high school and you already know what you want to do, whether it's going into working some sort of trade, going to trade school, or being an entrepreneur online, you can definitely, anybody can make money online without going to college and be very successful, making multiple six figures per month and per year
Per month.
without going to college. Yeah, maybe not multiple six figures, but you definitely can. Lots of different things you could do. Airbnb arbitrage is something I've been looking into. It's just an example where you obviously don't need a college degree, and if you're just stacking up rentals, even just real estate, you don't need college.
We can't even. I'm not gonna get into all of that because that's just gonna throw everything into a different direction. But
yeah. You don't need college to be successful, but no. I think it is beneficial. I think I'm going to be more knowledgeable after college than if I didn't go to college when it comes to bodybuilding. And I think that will be beneficial for my career in the long run in terms of the knowledge, as well as the credibility aspect of just saying that I have a bachelor's of science in physiology. Yeah. So I think
what it really comes down to is, like I said, I didn't go to college. Obviously, I run a successful business now, but you could learn everything you need to know about bodybuilding and coaching on your own. A lot of it comes down to experience. You're going to need years of experience no matter what. There's no way around that. But I think the way that, you're only going to learn so much in school. It's not going to cover every aspect, but I think the way that it's presented to you is a much easier way to learn. It's a lot more organized than trying to figure everything out on your own. Like, I think Adam probably learned a majority of the stuff that I've learned in a much shorter time span and was able to understand it the way it was presented to him in a much easier way than how it took me so much time to figure that whatever thing it is, figure that thing out and connect all the dots and really understand it. It probably took me more time to, really gather a full understanding because it's just presented to you in an organized manner. Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah, but then I think it also goes a step further because you basically get more stuff pushed towards you. And so you just kind of have to grab what you can and understand what you can. And then you just keep getting that pushed onto you. So you eventually learn more and get a bigger picture and can kind of think your own way through things. So for example, I've learned things outside of college, like from YouTube or from TikTok, Instagram, or whatever it is, where it's like, they'll tell you something. This is what beta oxidation is. This is what, insulin sensitivity is. And you get an understanding of what it means. But with college or with any sort of actual education, you start from the bottom and you learn how do receptors work? How does digestion work? And building your way up to understand, okay, how does insulin work? What is insulin itself? And learning what insulin sensitivity really is and being able to apply it to more things. That I think is the main benefit of going to college and learning all of this stuff where it's a crazy amount of information that you have to absorb in such a short period of time versus just kind of learning at your own pace with someone just saying this information, just gathering puzzle pieces by yourself. That's why I think it's also more beneficial.
Yeah. Well, that also, explains, one aspect because, like you said, you have to understand the layers to everything. There's so much more that goes into something like insulin sensitivity. And, I made that video on insulin sensitivity the other day and people hear that and they, with whatever topic it is, they hear something and they run with it and they don't fully understand what they're hearing. And, even when I'm learning them by myself, it wasn't presented to me in this organized manner. So I would have had to do my own research and go in find out those layers the opposite way. I find out what insulin sensitivity is, then I start, looking into insulin, how it interacts, the mechanisms in the body, all that stuff. So I had to do that research myself. But when people hear these things online, they're not actually putting in the effort to learn and, really find out how the mechanism behind that specific thing works, whatever it is. They just don't fully understand. That's why we have so much confusion within things. People hear TikTok's a huge thing, man. I mean, we all know they fucking hear one thing, whether it's, stimulus to fatigue ratio, shit like that. They just hear these concepts and they don't understand what goes into that. And they just understand whatever was presented to them in a 60-second clip. And then we just have a bunch of people running around saying all this shit they really don't understand. So I guess, that's another upside, I guess, to going to school, even though I didn't go to school, but yeah.
Yeah. And then you also have these people that think they really know what they're talking about when they don't. And they, for example, one idea popped in my head when you were talking about that was when Cialis started becoming a really big deal. And
oh my God.
And people just started trying to sound scientific and speaking outside of their actual frame of knowledge, where they just started saying what it is because they heard someone else say it. Oh, Cialis is a PDE5 inhibitor. What the fuck does that even mean? Nobody knows what that means. They just say it's a PDE5 inhibitor. But then when you go to college, you take certain classes, literally I just learned about it this past few weeks of basically learning about the reproductive system and then the different mechanisms, the different enzymes, the different substrates, and all these different things that are a part of it. And then you see something that says PDE5. Well, what is that? And you realize it's phosphodiesterase. And you've seen that enzyme in different places. You've seen it in the brain, you've seen it in the liver, you've seen it in all these different places. And you start to understand what it actually does. And then you see there's a whole list of PDE1, PED2, all the way 5, 6, 7. And they're in different concentrations in different parts of the body. And then you start to understand what it actually does. And you see PDE5 is in the male genitalia. It's also in the vascular system. It's in the smooth muscle walls, and understanding what it actually does. So that's just kind of another thing, is like understanding the big picture instead of just a fact.
So I think really all this comes down to at the end of the day is the individual's willingness to learn. There's plenty of people, like I said, you don't need to go to school whatsoever to become extremely knowledgeable in bodybuilding and be a coach. You do need that experience, but either way, it's your willingness to learn. All the information is there online. It's about the amount of effort you're going to put in to actually try to understand these concepts and everything behind it. Same thing in school. Like, there's plenty of people, I'm sure, that are learning the exact same things that Adam's learning, that are literally just short-term memorizing these things to pass a test. And then when they graduate, they actually learned fucking nothing. And it's because they didn't actually absorb that information. They weren't invested into it. They didn't want to learn. So it's just two different ways to go about it. It all comes down to how much you really care about this, how much it is a priority to you, and how much, how much time you want to put in to actually learn and understand these concepts. So you could do it, either way, really. And going to school might make it a lot easier for some people to really learn. And in that case, it's definitely worth the investment, even if you're doing it for yourself, if you feel like that's a better option for you, right?
Yeah, 100%. Definitely.
Yeah. So moving on now. Today's Sunday. I just dropped the Bro Split program, so I wanted to talk a bit about training splits here now, since that is such a huge controversial thing that we constantly see. And a while back last year, I made another program called Legs Push Pull Arms, and it's because I basically made this standpoint that when people typically run push-pull legs, is their arms that typically will get neglected because they, push them off the end of the workout. There's not a lot of effort going towards them. There's usually little to no volume. They're doing like 1 or 2 exercises for biceps or triceps, maybe like 2 or 3 sets. And these people end up having small arms as a result of that. So why don't we just add an arm day to that to have more priority to the arms and give more emphasis and focus to that, so it doesn't end up becoming a weak point. People loved it. It got a bunch of good feedback, and then the whole thing came back, when it was trending that, bro splits are terrible out of nowhere. Everybody starts saying bro splits are terrible, even though people have been doing them for the fucking past like 40 years or whatever. And basically every single successful bodybuilder you see runs a bro split. I don't think people are aware of that, but, once I started, arguing that bro splits are fine when volume is equated for, then everybody asked me to make one. So I made one, but let's talk about that. What is your opinion on, let's start with push-pull legs. What's your opinion on just overall push-pull legs? Is there a situation where you think it is better suited for an individual opposed to a bro split or an Arnold split?
Definitely can be. There's a reason why people run push-pull legs. It's not like it should never be used.
Well, I think the majority of people who run push-pull legs do it because they are under the impression nowadays that it is the proper way to train. When I grew up training, I never even fucking heard of push-pull legs. I know it was around. I know Dante Trudeau, I think he put an emphasis on push-pull legs. That was before I even started working out. But everybody I was surrounded by, like, it was just bro split. You do back and bis. You do a bro split can be set up many ways. For you guys don't know as well. It doesn't have to be just legs, chest, back, shoulders, arms. That's the way that I made mine because it's the most simple way, standardized way to lay it out that can apply to universally anybody. But bro splits are the same thing as like prioritizing a muscle group, where it's like I could do quads, then chest, then back, then back and hams, then arms. It's just basically training 1 or 2 muscle groups a day and having more emphasis. But go on to what you were saying.
Push-pull legs, like a push workout, for example, you're training 3 muscle groups. Yeah. And even if you look at upper lower, that's even more muscle groups. If you're doing an entire upper body workout, that's a lot of muscle groups where there's pros and cons to it. And I would say there's a time and place for it. So for a beginner or someone who's never been to a gym before and they just want to kind of get into the motion, they're going to go, let's say, 3 times a week, push-pull legs or upper lower might be suitable for them rather than doing a full body part split. But for somebody who is trying to get more into bodybuilding and really focused on building up their physique, I would say push-pull legs generally isn't going to be the best option for most people, especially if you are trying to prioritize a certain muscle group rather than giving the same frequency to each muscle. One huge major, I'd say, mistake when it comes to push-pull legs is running it as a 7-day split where you're training 6 days in a row and then taking 1 rest day per week. That I don't think is how anybody should really train. If you do end up running a push-pull leg split, I think it's much more beneficial to do 3 days on, 1 day off, 3 days on, 1 day off, where that might not be suitable for somebody who works a certain type of job where they can't work out on a certain day if they can't fit it in, whatever.
Yeah, because when you do 3 days on, 1 day off, 3 days on, 1 day off, it always falls on different days of the week. So it's hard to fall into a consistent, routine if you're relying on, having like a work schedule and shit like that. Because then you end up going Sunday or you're not going Monday. It's just, it's constantly changing.
Right. Yeah. So then for them, they might end up preferring a 7-day split where they're doing 3 days on, 1 day off, 2 days on, 1 day off, having 2 rest days per week, training 5 days per week. But then when you're getting into that, then you can kind of customize the training split.
You keep saying 7-day split. I would call that a 5-day split. Why are you calling it a 7-day split?
Because it's based on a 7-day microcycle, like 7 days and then it repeats, versus 8-day split is like, what would you call 3 days on, 1 day off?
I would call it a 5-day split just because you're training 5 days out of those 7 days.
On like an 8-day split where you're doing 3 days on, 1 day off, 3 days on, 1 day off. What would you call that?
3 days on, 1 day off, 3 days on, 1 day off.
Like a 3 day on, 1 day off split. I guess that'd be another name for it.
But I would just call it fucking push-pull legs. But yeah, I mean, yeah. I guess that would be. What'd you say? 7-day split?
Yeah, 7-day
split. It changes. It changes. I'm trying to think about it. I'm like losing my train of thought trying to think of that like a calendar in my head. So it'd be like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, rest Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So it's 6 days. 6-day split. It's a 6-day split. Like the split is 6 days.
What, the 3 days on, 1 day off?
3 days on, 1 day off, 3 days on, 1 day off.
Well,
or are they the same? Are they the same 3 days, or are they 2 different patterns? So is it like?
I've got training programs that I've written where I never really wrote a push-pull leg split, but I'll have something where it's like 3 days that are similar and then 3 days that are like similar to that, but it's a little bit different. So it's not exactly like 3 days rest and then the same 3 days. I wouldn't really write that. That would be a push-pull leg split generally.
That's what a lot of people do, but I would never advise anybody to do that.
No, and really also what it comes down to is prioritization. So once you also have developed your physique a little bit, you've been training for over a year or 2 or longer, then you kind of want to, whether you want to prioritize bringing up a certain muscle group, like let's say your chest sucks and you need to bring up your chest or back, whatever it is, you might want to have more volume for that muscle group because you need to be able to put more of a stimulus on it, and therefore you might need to recover more from it. And it might be a little bit easier for you to recover from doing more volume split up over 2 days in the split or microcycle, same thing, versus putting all of that volume into 1 day where you're getting to the end of the workout and you're already being a little more fatigued. So for example, to put it like, to give you numbers, if let's say you're going to be doing 16 working sets per week for back and you want to bring your back up, you're probably going to have a more effective 16 total working sets if you break that up into 8 working sets on 1 day, rest a few days, and then 8 working sets and then rest a few days, versus doing all 16 working sets in 1 day. Those last however many sets, you're gonna be more fatigued from the previous however many sets. So that's why I would end up structuring your split so that you increase the frequency so that you can also have a higher amount of volume in the entire week. That's one way to look at a split.
Well, yeah, of course. That's giving prioritization. So let's say, what do you think about I don't know who I think it was Jordan Peters who posted this, and then everybody started fucking regurgitating it about doing full body 3 times a week, I believe, for beginners. How do you feel about that?
I'm generally not.
I think it's retarded. I think it's retarded.
I don't think you can cause, like, it's the same exact reasoning as before. If you're doing full body, and let's say you're doing 3 working sets per muscle in the entire workout, you've got legs, chest, back, shoulders, arms. That's 5. So that's 15 sets if you're doing only 3 working sets per muscle.
Wait. What did you just say? Legs, chest, back, shoulders, arms, 3 working sets each. Well, legs is still fucking quads, hamstring, calves.
So ignore the calves. Fuck the calves. So you can do, let's say, calves. 6. So that'd be 18 working sets. And if you're actually So this is kind of in depth. So the person who would be doing that type of split probably doesn't know how to and doesn't need to train as hard as a competitive bodybuilder. So maybe they will need a higher amount of volume and can tolerate a higher amount of volume than someone who's, let's say, like me or you. Um, so they might end up wanting to do up to 20 working sets per muscle per week. But again, we're talking about just within each workout. So when it comes down to doing only 3 working sets per muscle and then doing that again in a few days, not only are you not allowing yourself to fully recover and cause enough of a stimulus within each session to fully see the adaptation from it, but you're just not going to cause enough volume in general for each muscle. So that's why I wouldn't recommend it for lots of reasons.
Well, it's recommended for beginners. I don't know. I don't remember if he recommended that for beginners, like in a general context. Because I want to just note here that everything we're talking about for the most part is going to be in the context of people trying to pursue bodybuilding, not like just general population people just getting into fitness just to work out to be healthier. That's a whole different discussion. That's a whole different thing.
And build muscle.
You could literally do anything. You could jump rope. You're just being healthy. Fucking does not that deep if you're trying to just be healthy and get into fitness. But if you are trying to optimize hypertrophy, build as much muscle as you can, and pursue bodybuilding, then it's entirely a different thing. But as far as training full body 3 times a week, I don't see you being able, for one, within that as a beginner, you're not going to learn how to really train a muscle. That's a huge thing that people overlook is, when you start training, you're training chest, you're training back, you need to learn how to actually give adequate stimulus to that muscle, how to actually, train that muscle to failure. I feel like if you're just doing that for 2 sets in a workout, you're not really pushing yourself to any extent. You're not going to learn how to really train hard. You're learning how to train hard within a given session, but you're not learning how to really break down that tissue in that muscle. You're not learning how to actually get the most out of that muscle. Do you know what I'm saying here?
Yeah, and then also along with that is you got to also think about it as this is a skill. Bodybuilding is a skill, and how you get better.
Okay, yes, you are what's the word that I'm looking for?
I'm just saying you need to practice to get better at a skill. So if you're doing 3 working sets per muscle in a workout, or even 6 as a beginner, that's just not enough practice for you to get better at that skill. And so if you do less muscles or less muscle groups in a workout, you can do more volume per muscle, which means you can do more sets and you can get more practice.
Okay, I just thought of an analogy. So it's like this. It's like, let's say you're playing a sport, right? Let's say you're getting into fucking soccer or basketball or football or whatever. And, let's just compare this. Let's say you need to get better at fucking, shooting threes or whatever. But every time you go to practice, you only shoot threes twice, and then you do everything else twice. You're never really going to focus on getting better at shooting threes. It's like, how are you going to get better at really learning how to connect with your chest or your back or whatever if you're only doing minimal work each time, rather than, giving more attention within each session so that you can really prioritize getting better at training this muscle over time instead,
Exactly. Yeah.
It's just taking away from what you could be doing. But so full body, I think full body is fine for, somebody who's getting into it, just like try to lose weight or something though. And, just be more active, in that case, because we're not really focusing on trying to,
like if you're just trying to not even just focus on changing your physique, you really just want to, starting out, just build the habit of going to the gym. And that alone, if you're just going in and, maybe you're only comfortable, and this is just speaking to a very, very like starting out beginner, just doing 1 machine per muscle, that's something they can do that's comfortable so that they can build the habit first of getting the confidence to go to the gym and just going to the gym in general. And then eventually they'll, want to start advancing their physique a little bit more. And then they probably want to change their split into something that's not full body 3 times a week.
Yeah. Well, how did you start training? When you started training, what did you do?
When I first started training, I was training with my mom and I was doing whatever she was doing. That was back in like 8th grade. Then once I kind of started going by myself, I was moving more into like a power building type of training split because I was more interested in power lifting, but also bodybuilding. So I don't remember my exact split, but my workouts were more structured around doing flat bench and then chest, shoulders, triceps. It was like a push-pull legs type of split, but the first movement was always flat bench, barbell squat, or deadlift. And I don't remember if I was doing 6 days on, 1 day off, however many years ago that was. But once I remembered like starting getting into learning about training splits, I remember hearing my friends talk about doing like push pull legs as an actual split, and I was thinking that doesn't sound like it makes any sense, because if you're actually training hard on your push day and you're doing push pull legs, rest, I'm going to need more than just 48 hours to recover and to be able to put everything into that next push workout again. Same with back and especially legs. If you're training legs hard on Wednesday and you have them again on Saturday, you only have Thursday and Friday to rest and recover in terms of both the muscle, the connective tissue in your joints, and your central nervous system. You're just not going to be able to put as much as you can into that next workout. So I remember for as long as I can remember, I've always been doing a body part split or a bro split, whatever you want to call it.
When I was
times.
when I was younger, when push pull legs was first presented to me, it was presented to me as a powerlifting split. Like that's what it was known as, you know, from everybody that I knew or anything I looked up at. It was known as the powerlifting split, and it made sense that way because, you know, powerlifting, you know, bench more frequently, squat more frequently, deadlift more frequently, and they wouldn't train to failure either. Obviously, it's easier to progressively overload on your numbers and, you know, move more weight from point A to point B. That's the goal of powerlifting, right? But that's not the goal of bodybuilding. You know, obviously progressive overload is, you know, crucial, but it's not like I'm not hyper focused on constantly having to move more weight, you know, in a linear fashion. Like it doesn't always work that way.
Yeah.
I thought I couldn't hear you for a second. But yeah, so when I would train, I was always just concerned with just training to failure, essentially. You know, I would stick to primary movements and, you know, say I want to get stronger at bench or whatever, and like consistently try to get stronger on that over time. But the main primary focus was I'm always training hard to failure, focusing on getting a crazy pump. And obviously, you know, a lot of research talking about the pump. I don't know, we'll get into that after, but yeah. And then I would train 6 days on, 1 day off, which I know I would never do now. And I don't advise many people to do now, but I also think, you know, when you're doing a bro split, when you're younger, you can kind of like get away with it, you know, because I would do quads, chest, back, you know, hamstrings, shoulders, and arms. There's so much time to recover between that. And, you know, I think when you're newer to the gym, when you're a beginner, you can get away with a lot more. You do this, the newbie gains, you know, you're just going to fucking grow. It's new stimulus, you know, you're going to recover, you're going to grow, and you're going to fucking respond no matter what you do, even if it's the worst shit ever, you're going to respond really.
Right. But also you're not using that heavy of loads relatively to what like a bodybuilder is going to be using. So a heavy squat for someone who's in their first 1, 2, 3 years of lifting is not going to place as much of a demand on their central nervous system to where they really need a rest day just to recover the central nervous system. They can still train their arms. So that's why I think beginners can get away with training 6 days in a row, because they're not going that heavy for their central nervous system. They're going heavy for themselves, like for the local muscle.
I saw a post about this the other day, and I liked it. I want to see how you feel, but I don't know if you saw it. So it was like a video showing, you know, Chris squatting, and it was like, you know, all these kids want to hack squat now. They all want to get pendulum squats, and nobody wants a barbell squat because, you know, it's not as good for quads or whatever. Did you see that post?
No, like Chris Bumstead?
Yeah, Chris Bumstead. And he showed the example as like why, you know, Chris wouldn't, even though I see Chris, you know, all the time, Chris does squat, but regardless of that, you know, it takes a lot more to recover from when, you know, I'm squatting 500 pounds or Chris is squatting 500 pounds than, you know, the kid that's squatting fucking 225, you know, that the reason why he would opt to hack squat or do a pendulum squat more is because it's, you know, less taxing, you know, it doesn't take as much to recover from. You're going to get more out of the movement, you know, with a hack squat or whatever, better isolation. But also at the end of the day, you know, when kids avoid doing the squat, bench, and deadlift movements or whatever, or specifically squat, and they just go straight into, you know, what we're doing now with hack squats and stuff like that, they don't really develop, you know, what's the word I'm looking for? The mobility. You know, they don't build stabilization. They don't really ever develop that aspect because they just try to skip straight to hack squats because they see, you know, the bigger guys doing it now. So what do you think about that? Do you think do you think that makes sense? Do you agree with it? Do you disagree with it?
Well, it makes sense for someone who's been training for however many years, at least over 5 years, to be doing like a hack squat or a Smith
I'm
squat.
talking, yeah, I'm talking about like beginners. Like you see, like some kid
Right.
gets in the gym, he's been lifting for 6 months, and he sees, me not doing barbell squats. I do hack squats, and he's like, well, hack squats are better because you get more quad out of it or whatever. So do you think it makes more sense for that kid to do that and replace barbell squats with that now, or do you think should be crucial, a staple exercise for beginners?
No, I definitely think that beginners should become proficient at doing barbell movements and developing that foundation of stability within their core, within the entire lower part of their body and their entire upper body. Because barbell squatting is a natural movement. Squatting in general is a free weight, so you're not really going to see that much fatigue at that level of training when you've been training for only 1 to 2 years, to where it's really going to negatively impact you and prevent you from progressing. And I think it's something that, like, there's a lot of factors to it. It's going to build you mentally. Getting under a barbell and squatting weight that's heavy for you, whether that's like 3 plates or something, like that's going to build
fucking hard.
Yeah, and it's going to teach you, like, okay, like you're capable of doing a lot more than you thought you were, and you can learn how to really push way like further closer to failure. Versus on a hack squat, it's not as intimidating, and so it's not going to take as much adrenaline. You're not going to be able. I mean, this is also
I throw up after hack squats all the time.
Yeah. Right, but if you start with hack squats, you don't learn how to really train with true intensity versus if you train on a barbell starting out.
Because it requires more from you.
Yeah, and then you can also talk about like just like the physiological demands of a barbell squat is going to be more beneficial in terms of the stimulus, but the fatigue is going to be higher. But what these kids that are getting into training kind of get wrong is they listen to the science only rather than trying things for themselves. They're too scared of the fatigue. They're only thinking about the stimulus to fatigue ratio when really the fatigue.
At the end of that video, the guy fucking said, he was like, if you, I think, I don't know, he was like, if you can't squat 275 for 10 reps, I don't ever want to hear stim to fatigue ratio come out of your fucking mouth.
Exactly. Like the actual raw magnitude of the stimulus that you're going to get from a barbell squat, if you're brand new into training, being able to squat 2 plates, 275, and then 3 plates, like you're going to see a large stimulus from that, and that's going to build you physically and mentally. And then I think also throwing in a hack squat just to not isolate, but like focus more on the quads rather than having to stabilize using your back, using your glutes more. That will be beneficial. I'm not saying either one is beneficial or not beneficial.
So the thing is, I don't know why people think you only have to do one movement.
Right.
You could do both.
Like think about it like this. So each exercise is like a tool in your tool belt. If you're only progressing on this one tool in your tool belt, you're only making this much progress. Think about the amount of area that is, surface area, from this one tool, versus if you have 3 tools. Now you have this much area that you're progressing on. You're making more longitudinal, more horizontal progress, and being able to progress on more things, being able to therefore make more progress over time, having more tools in your tool belt that you're progressing on. But of course, with more longitudinal progress that you're making, that can hinder the total amount of vertical progression that you're making, if that makes sense. So
I don't know, you lost me with the fucking vertical and horizontal shit.
All right, now who's this guy?
Now you're sideways. Oh wait, no, you're back. Okay.
So there's this guy, Nick Gloff. You know who that is? He goes to your gym.
Yeah, I see him all the time.
Okay, yeah. So he talked about this a long time ago, and it just stuck with me, talking about this specific thing, where if you're only practicing one variation of a movement, and over the years of training, you're only going to be getting good at hack squats, and you never touch a Smith squat, you never touch a pendulum squat, you never touch a barbell squat, you're not going to see the individual different benefits of each variation that it's going to provide for you. I'm not saying you need to switch it up all the time, but get really good at hack squats, and then get really good at barbell squats, and then get really not in that order. Get really good at barbell
other way
yeah, get barbell squats, and then get really good at something else. And same with everything. Get really good at everything so that you're overall a better bodybuilder and have more developed tools in your tool belt rather than only focusing on that one tool. That's what I'm saying.
I think barbell squats are just overall better for just mobility. Just like as an athlete, as a functional human being.
Well, yeah, because a lot of people who don't barbell squat
Like,
when they first start out, they can't get deep anymore.
yeah,
Their ankle
if you had somebody who started on hack squats and like only hack squat and then put them under a barbell squat, their fucking form would most likely be atrocious. They would not like be able to do it efficiently.
yeah.
And that's a position everybody should be able to get into, you know, a deep squat, a barbell high bar squat. Obviously there's factors to that, but you should be able to get into a good position. I mean, it doesn't have to be ass to grass necessarily, but you know, you should have good ankle mobility. You should have good, you know, posture with your back. You should know how to perform that movement efficiently. And that's also going to train it because, like I said, you know, it's, you know, just functional everyday things. You know, when you know how to get into that position, just like literally carrying shit, picking shit up, lifting from your legs. Like, remember you're younger, your dad,
Yeah,
I mean, my dad would say, lift with your legs. Like, that's like, you know, what you mean. You get, if you drive to your legs, if you don't ever put your body into a position like that when you're lifting, you know, you don't ever really develop those adaptations. And I think that Guy also said in that video, it's like you'll get knocked over by like a breeze of wind just because you don't know how to like really stabilize yourself or something
right.
along those lines.
And
but
theory that exactly goes with what you just said. With you'll get knocked over by a gust of wind. This is just complete theory. I've never heard anybody say this, but think about where the force, like the direction of force in the quad itself, in the leg itself. So if you're on a hack squat, you don't have to stabilize. You just are going down and then going up, and the muscles are contracting in a certain direction.
Yep.
But if, let's say, you're holding a barbell on your back, really heavy barbell, and the wind blows you this way, you got the outer portion of your quad, your vastus lateralis, preventing you from falling over this. You got your core, you got everything else also. But think about, you're going to be putting more tension in that direction on the muscle fibers. So this, again, completely a theory, but with a barbell squat, because it requires more stability, you're able to put more tension on the muscle fibers in more directions than just a fixed machine. Does that make sense?
I get what you're saying, but I feel like people are gonna hear that and they're gonna say, well, like, you know, fucking gravity only comes down. So like this is the way that you're moving. But I understand like what you're saying. You just need to develop stability. It develops more stability at the end of the day, you know?
Yeah.
That's all it is. It's like you see people, you know, deadlift and they like wobble, you know, they can't fucking stay strict when you deadlift, you know, you want to move like a machine. Like there should not be, you know, a point where you're fucking like tripping over yourself, and you'll see people do it and they like fucking can't, you know, keep themselves into a locked position because they don't have, you know, the proper bracing, or they're just not good at the movement, they're new to it or whatever. So obviously, you know, that can in the future translate, you not having that can translate to, you know, potential injuries or just anything really. It's just, you know, something you want to have developed if you're going to get into this from the start.
Yeah, definitely. Developing that mind muscle connection, developing that neuroplasticity, which if you're able to train a muscle a different way, that might make those neurons that innervate the muscle fibers be able to grow and increase in the amount of synapses that they have, and be able to basically contract more muscle fibers and develop the mind muscle connection even better, and make you a better bodybuilder in the long run. But again, that's just complete theory and probably doesn't apply to every person.
Let's talk about mind muscle connection since you brought that up. Because I'm gonna address all these stupid fucking trends that I hear all the time.
Yeah.
You know, my muscle connection's not important. All right, let's talk about that. Even though it goes directly against what every single bodybuilder has ever said for the fucking beginning of time.
Science.
Why? What is the reasoning behind people saying that? Because it just comes down to progressively overloaded mechanical tension. Is that the reasoning why they say that?
Yes,
I think
and
so, right?
Also make the argument, and this is kind of a stupid argument, that if, let's say, you're only doing isometric contractions, you're getting a great mind muscle connection, but that's not really resulting in very much mechanical breakdown. It's not really going to cause very much hypertrophy. If you're only doing, like, you're just squeezing your bicep's not really going to grow, but you're getting a really good mind muscle connection. So that's
right. I remember where this came from. It's because I think this all started with the fucking squeeze press. This fucking this movement. What is it? What was it? What is it called?
I don't know what it's called.
I don't know. It's just fucking some stupid shit. So basically what I think, you know, came from that was somebody came on and said that, what's the fucking word? Stimulation? Is it stimulation?
Like stimulus?
It's something like that. Like mind muscle connection stimulus doesn't necessarily correlate to hypertrophy or whatever. Sensation. That's right. Okay, yeah, sensation. Because when you squeeze this and you're doing this, you know, you get that it feels like you're contracting. It feels like, you know, mind muscle connection. So people were confusing that. Now it just became, you know, a basic misunderstanding across such a fucking huge platform where people just started saying my muscle connection doesn't matter, sensation doesn't matter, when that's not fucking true. So my muscle connection does matter because it knows it. That's how you know you're performing a movement, executing with intent, and doing it efficiently. You know, you want to be driving through that muscle. If I am sitting here doing a fucking dumbbell bench press or a chest press machine or a fucking curl or a pull down, and I can't feel I'm doing a press, I can't feel my chest contracting, lowering that weight. If I can't feel the muscle working throughout that range of motion, then I am more than likely doing something wrong. You know, obviously, if you're a beginner, you have to develop that essentially. So it's not something I would really stress over because you have to develop that neurological connection with your chest to begin with. And that's where it comes into, you know, prioritizing that muscle, making the effort to develop that, focusing on developing that mind muscle connection. But if you're already experienced and you don't have it, you don't feel the muscle you're working, you're doing something wrong. So sensation does matter. Absolutely. You know?
Right. Yeah, I definitely agree, because what a lot of people, especially beginners, think, and they hear the people say that sensation doesn't matter, mind muscle connection doesn't matter, but they don't actually have their form and their execution and even their own structural anatomy fully understood. So in a lat pull down, for example, they might think that, oh, it doesn't matter if you're not feeling your lats, you're still targeting your lats if you're performing shoulder extension or shoulder adduction. And what you'll end up seeing them do is maybe they're
a fucking face pull.
Yeah, they're doing like this, or they're doing it all in their biceps and whatever it is, but they're not actually targeting their lat. Oh my gosh.
What just happened? We just lost him. Houston, we have a problem. Houston. I gotta put him back in here. Let's see. Is this still recording? I think so. Let's go here. Oop. What happened?
Getting calls. Hopefully that doesn't mess
Put
up the video.
put your phone on like do not disturb or something.
Yeah. I still get calls if I do not disturb.
Well, they'll go straight to voicemail, I think.
No, I still get calls. So what I was saying is, on a lat pull down, for example, you could be doing your execution completely wrong, but thinking that you're doing it correctly. And you're like, oh, it's okay, I'm not feeling it in my lat. But if you're not feeling it in your lats, or if you're not feeling your chest in the chest press, then you're probably not doing the movement correctly. Your execution is probably off, even though you think it's just moving from point A to point B is this range of motion, but you know, you're probably not doing it correctly if you don't have someone actually watching you in person, or you don't have a coach, or you're not taking a video of yourself. So mind muscle connection definitely does play a role in having good execution.
Absolutely. Because otherwise, you know, how do you know you're working the muscle you're trying to work? And obviously, like I said, I'm going to repeat this again, that this more so pertains to once you're a bit more experienced, you know, because if you're just starting out in the gym, you're not going to fucking have a crazy contraction in your lats or your chest, you know? So it's at that point, it's about learning the execution, getting it down. If you have somebody with you, a great way to really develop that neurological connection is one, you know, have somebody watch you, make sure you're doing good form, and having them, you know, touch the area you're trying to focus. This will help you develop that neurological connection a lot more. I said it's a lot with like rear delt flies. Like a lot of people just have their traps take over. They start pulling back, having scapular retraction. They take the focus away from their delts to an extent. But when you have somebody place their fingers just on the back of your rear delts, it helps them connect with that a lot more and feel that contraction. And once you do that so many times, you know, it becomes pretty much just natural to you. So that's how you should go if you're a beginner and you don't have it developed. You know, just have a workout buddy if you can. If not, you know, just, you know, hopefully you know somebody that can look over your form, or just watch videos and make the effort to learn yourself, and you'll develop that connection over time. But if you've been doing this for a while and you don't have a mind muscle connection established with all the movements you're doing, then you are more than likely doing them wrong. And obviously exercise selection plays a role in that too. You know, you're not going to have a fucking crazy quad contraction on the squat, right?
Right.
So,
but I mean, you should still feel.
Yeah, you should still feel
the eccentric. Like,
yeah. So you should always feel the muscle that is, you know, the primary mover at work here. Always.
Rear delts are a great example. Yeah, you said rear delts. I was training with someone last night, and they weren't feeling the rear delts and rear delt flies, and so I literally just brought their elbows up a little bit, just like this, and touched the rear delts. And before, it was like a little soft when they're contracting, even though they're doing the same range of motion as what a rear delt fly is supposed to do. But when they brought their elbow up just a little bit, I was able to like make that muscle connection. Now they're using more muscle fibers, utilizing more motor units, and therefore causing more muscle protein breakdown and therefore going to get more hypertrophy in the rear delts. So
yeah, rear delts is a huge example that I see with, a lot of people. I've always seen. It was something, I had starting out, but that's why it's, important to have a good workout partner, if you can, not only just to push your limits, push you, train harder, more intensely, if they, are that type of person, which you do want somebody to push you, but also to help you, really, dial in on what you're trying to focus on, even if you are, experienced. When I would train with Waddy at arm brush, just having him like touch my back and, control the movement, what I'm doing, it just helps put that emphasis on there a lot more when you have somebody holding that there and you really are just focusing on solely driving there, because it's harder to do when somebody's not touching there. It's like you feel that there, so it's like that's where all your attention is being drawn to, so it helps you dial in on that a lot more. So my muscle connection, we got that. Stimulus to fatigue ratio, fuck that, we're not going to talk about that. Actually, do you want to talk about that?
A little bit, yeah.
Okay, you talk about it, you go into it.
Stimulus fatigue ratio is overhyped a lot. There's a time and place for it, definitely. Like I have a client right now that's 4 weeks out of a bodybuilding show, or 5 weeks, 4.5 weeks, something like that. And I was telling him, maybe you should be doing a chest press machine instead of a dumbbell bench press, because the actual effort of getting into position with dumbbells, training by yourself without even having anybody in his gym, and just the effort it takes to get the dumbbells in position and to stabilize, is just taking away from what you can actually put into the movement itself. Of course, if you just enjoy doing dumbbell bench press and you feel a good amount of connection there, you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you. My cat is like meowing super fucking loud.
So that's weird. Yeah, so I just told him to switch to a machine chest press just to get a better stimulus to fatigue ratio. I obviously don't say it like that, but that's just what makes more sense. But when it comes to building muscle, and you're focused and you're trying to cause a large stimulus on the muscle and recover from it, and then build muscle as an adaptation in order to continue to repeat that process, cause more of a stimulus, recover from it, adapt, you can't be afraid of the stimulus. So you see all these people
afraid of the fatigue, you mean?
That's what I mean. You can't be afraid of the fatigue, because the stimulus is what's going to be the stimulus that causes muscle breakdown and cause the hypertrophy. So I can't believe that I think that people think that a kneeling single arm cable pull down is going to give you a better stimulus to fatigue ratio than a bent over barbell row. Yes, a barbell row is going to give you more fatigue, but the raw stimulus that you're going to get from a barbell row
absolutely
is way more than a single arm pull down, especially if you're training it with the same amount of sets and the same rep range. You're just going to get more stimulus. And it does not matter that you're getting more fatigue.
A lot of the arguments that I see are pretty much revolved around people basically just saying in some fancy way that they're afraid of fatigue. They're afraid to train harder. Why would I do that? It produces more fatigue. Why would I do? That's another thing, is like we were talking about, the hack squat and barbell squat. Why would I do the barbell squat? It produces more fatigue when I can get more out of a hack squat. It's like there's more. It's not, first of all, it's not that simple. It's really not. And what is so bad about the fatigue? Like, what are you not able to recover from? Everybody's so concerned, I'm not going to be able to recover. What do you mean you're not going to be able to recover? How are you not going to be able to fucking recover? Like, what's going to happen? You go home, you rest, you eat, you replenish, you fucking recover. If you're not recovering, maybe adjust your volume or something like that. I've never had that issue ever. I've never had that issue with a client either, where they're just not recovering. I only see this shit online.
Well, yeah, and then what they could also mean is that they're not recovering in time for their next training session, which comes back to the training split. Maybe doing
I need to do push pull legs. I can't do barbells because I can't fucking do barbell squat twice a week. Why can't you do a bro split then? Oh, frequency doesn't matter. If you're doing the same amount of volume, do more volume in one session. How am I going to recover for that? Well, you have 7 fucking days till you're doing it again. What do you mean? Is that too much time? I need to do it every 3 days. What? No, you don't. Who said that? Who said?
Right. Or change your split to a certain type of body part split, where let's say you have 3 or 4 days in between, and you can just extend your split and just figure out what works best for you. And I've made so many different types of training splits that I've followed or given to people, and maybe I'll have like a hamstring and back day just to get more hamstring and back volume in, and then have an extra like 3 days in between the next back or leg day, and then have another like 3 or 4 days in between the next day, because I'm going to need more than just 48 hours to recover those large muscle groups. But because they are a weak point of mine, like hamstrings and back, I want to have more frequency. So I just take an extra rest day so that I can train as hard as possible and recover from it. And that's how you're just going to build more muscles. If you can train hard and recover from it, you're going to build more muscle rather than just having no frequency for it if it's a muscle you need to bring up, only training it once every 7-8 days. But for muscle, I mean, you're still going to build muscle doing it that way. If you're doing enough volume and training hard enough, that's a whole other ramble. But yeah, fuck the stimulus to fatigue ratio. Just go for the stimulus.
Just go for the stimulus. You heard it here first. Obviously, there's just like, there's so much that goes into everything. You know, it's like I can sit here, like you said, you know, barbell rows, you're going to get a lot more, you know, just raw stimulus from it. But it's like, you know, then people will argue, you know, why would I do barbell rows when I could do a chest machine row? And, you know, it's better for, you know, isolating my upper back or lats. And while that is true, it's like, yeah, do both, first of all. And also, it's like, the point of a barbell row is like you're getting more involvement in it. You know, you have more your erectors more involved. You have your posterior chain involved. It's going to, you know, you get more raw stimulus, like you said, which is, you know, definitely something I would say is crucial for, you know, beginners just trying to put on as much mass as possible, just doing fucking heavy rows, heavy squats. But then also depends how you have your split set up. Like I wouldn't do a bent over barbell row the day after I do fucking RDLs or squats, right? Your lower back's gonna be shot. So it's all you have to plan things effectively. You know how you're gonna break up your days. If you're gonna do back after legs, then obviously you know it makes more sense, even if you are a beginner, to have more chest supported things, just so you know your lower back isn't absolutely fucking fried. But if you want to do both, then just split those days up further apart from each other. All right, my camera literally just fucking died, so we had to pause this momentarily so I could fix that. But somebody asked about warming up going into your workouts. So let's talk about, you know, how to warm up, utilize feeder sets, go into your working sets, and all that good stuff here. Because I guess, you know, a lot of people don't understand how to actually do that. So when going into your working sets, what is your typical, you know, method going into it? Obviously, this is dependent on where you are in the workout, you know, what exercise you're specifically doing, but how do you typically approach that?
Yeah, exactly. It really depends where you are in the workout and what exercise it is, because you're going to warm up and do feeder sets differently for your first exercise versus last exercise, and a quad extension is going to be different than a leg press. So obviously, let's go over the definitions first. So you got warm-up sets, you got feeder sets, and you got working sets. So working sets are just sets you take to failure, and those are your actual sets that you would count, that are hard sets.
Or close to failure.
Yeah, or past failure if you're talking about intensifiers.
Yeah.
Now, ignoring that, just the warm-up and feeder sets. A warm-up set, the purpose of that is going to be to get warm. That's going to generally be a higher rep set. Could be anywhere from 8 to 20 reps, depending on the exercise. I'm generally not going to be doing that many reps because that is just a lot. So it's going to be very far from failure. Both warm-up sets and feeder sets are far from failure. They're not meant to fatigue you. The difference between a warm-up set and a feeder set is that a feeder set is going to be heavier a little bit than a warm-up set, and it's going to be lower in reps. The purpose of it is to acclimate your central nervous system to the loads that you're using and the movement patterns that you're doing. So on a squat, for example, you're probably going to want to do, let's say, 1 or 2 warm-up sets. Let's say the bar and a plate. The bar, let's say you do, you know, 10 to 15 reps. A plate, let's say you do 8 reps. I'd call those both warm-up sets. And they're lightweight, high reps. And then you keep increasing weight, and you, let's say, do 225. If let's say you're going to do 4 plates for your working weight. So let's say you do 2 plates for 6. You can call that a feeder set. You can call it a warm-up set if you want. I would call it a feeder set because it's a little bit lower in reps. Getting a little bit.
Feeder sets are usually 4 to 6 reps. Could be like 3 reps, but that's typically, you know, where they are.
Yeah, I mean, also you could even go down and let's say it's even 1 rep. If you're getting close to your working weight and you're just feeling it out, and it's like a squat, for example, I might just do 1 rep, maybe 2 or 3, depends on the exercise, but I'd say 1 to 6 reps would be a feeder set. And so let's say 2 plates, you do 6 reps, 3 plates, let's say you do 4 because you don't want to fatigue yourself and it's just something to feel out the weight. And then 365, let's say you do 2 or 3 reps, and then 405, and now you do your working weight. So that's generally how it would look, and that's the difference between a warm set and a feeder set. And the first 1 or 2 exercises of a certain muscle in a workout, you're generally going to want to do a warm-up set or 2 for them just to get the muscle and the joints warm. But once they're already warm, you don't need to do any warm-up sets. If you're doing 4 exercises for chest, and your last exercise is a cable fly, you don't need to do warm-up sets on a cable fly. You just maybe do one feeder set just to feel it out, feel out the weight, and feel out the movement, see if it feels good, and then just go into your working set. That's generally the idea of it.
Yeah. Well, I think utilizing these things, once you know where your strength is, once you have a better understanding of how strong you are in certain movements, and you have everything down, you have a bit more experience. It's going to be a lot easier to go into this. I think if you don't know how strong you are, then it's going to take a lot of playing around and just trying to figure that out. So like, let's say you don't know how much you could demo press, but the goal is you're on a program and your goal is to dumbbell press. You want to work up to a top set of 8 to 10 reps, and you have no idea how much you could do for 8 to 10 reps. So let's say you've done like 50s before, you've done 50s for like 10 reps. Maybe it was failure, maybe it wasn't. You're not really sure. You're new to this. Let's say you go and you do a warm-up set with like 30s, right? You do 10 reps. You do 10 reps there relatively easily. You're not anywhere near failure. You move to 40s and you do like 4 to 5 reps. You move it to 50s, you do 4 to 5 reps. Still, at that point when you're at that weight, you need to make a judgment call and say, can I do more weight? Or if I would have done an additional 5 reps with this, would I have reached failure? You need to be able to make that judgment call and really experiment if you're not entirely sure. At that point, if you feel like 50s would be good and you would be reaching failure around 10 reps, then I would say at that point, while you're in their feeder set, just say, fuck it, call it for a working set and try to go for 10 reps. Now, yep. If you get to 10 reps and it was still not to failure, at that point, depending how far away from failure is, I would probably I would bump the weight up and go for another working set after that. If it was, far away from failure. If you could have gotten like 1 or 2 more reps, then you should have continued the set to failure. But let's say you stop at 10, then I would have just called that the working set. And then the next time around, you have that noted down, say, okay, I had 2 reps in reserve when I did 50s. Next time I know, go to 55s or something and shoot for 8 reps. It's about being able to make judgment calls and really understanding where your strength lies. And then as you go into your workouts, you'll have a better method of, getting into those working sets. Now, what I do, it's not something I have in programs for the most part, but it's something Jansen had me do. I know he probably had it in your program too, is those activation rounds, right?
Yeah.
So that's I guess it got a lot of volume, but it's not anywhere near the failure. So I'll basically explain what it is. And if you watch my YouTube videos before this, you've seen me do them in the beginning of the workouts. It's basically, let's say on chest, I'll do chest flies, I'll do a chest cable flies, cable press, and like push-ups, and I'll do 3 rounds, 15 reps each. And none of these are relatively close to failure. They're not. They're very light. It's just about driving blood into the muscle, getting that execution down. So I'm really just emphasizing here, driving my biceps into my chest, focusing on getting contraction, just getting everything fully warmed up, getting everything primed, ready to go into the actual workout, getting the blood flow there, getting warm. And that itself counts as kind of like a warm-up. So then when I go into, the first move at incline dumbbell press, I'm not really doing warm-up sets. I'm going straight into feeders. I'm doing 4 reps, 4 reps, 4 reps. Then I go straight up to, 120s. Now I'm at my working weight, right? So you could implement that as well. And that would be like an overall warm-up going into your workouts, whether it's, back, quads, whatever, you could implement these little activation rounds just to drive blood in there, get everything, primed. Do you still do that?
No, I don't. I generally like to warm up with the exercise that I'm starting with. Saves time, and
it does take time. They do take time. They do take a lot of time to do. Not a lot, but it's just extra time.
It felt good. I would say it felt good to do like a really like intense warm up and get some really good blood flowing. But if I'm starting off on like a machine press or a cable press for chest, I'm just going to start with that movement, get some blood flowing in that movement, and then just work up in there. And I don't have to like move around the entire gym, especially if it's like a busy gym. Then I'll just start with that first movement.
So I mean, I do them. Sometimes I don't do them. I do them other times. It just really depends how I feel. But I do think that type of warming up could be very useful for somebody who is trying to develop a mindless connection, doesn't have it down. Like I said, going before you go into a dumbbell press, because it's hard to really, if you don't have a good neurological connection, something like dumbbell press, which requires more stabilization, or bar press, to really learn how to drive with your chest and feel that. But if you already, warm up with doing some cable press sets and some flies, you have, you're focusing on getting that contraction, you're getting the blood flow. Once you go into that movement, like the dumbbell press, it will be easier to put emphasis mentally on your chest, I think, moving into that. So I think that could be very useful for somebody who's trying to, work on developing that. But I like to do it before chest because I like to, get the blood flow in there before I do like, an incline dumbbell press or like lats. I like to do a few things of, pullovers just to drive blood to my lats and whatnot. But I don't really do it for legs. I don't like doing it for legs because it's just extra shit for legs. I don't really do it for much for shoulders either, but yeah.
There's like two ways to do it. So one is that way where you're just warming up and getting a bunch of blood into the muscle, but not actually causing much fatigue in the muscle. I think that would be very beneficial if you're trying to really prioritize your first compound movement. So if you're doing chest and you really want to go heavy and put everything you can into that into that chest press, the dumbbell chest press, then yeah, you wouldn't really want to do anything before that. That might take away from that. But I feel like I'm already at a point where I'm strong enough and I don't want to injure myself to where I put my dumbbell chest press second in the workout and I do a first exercise with the same goal of getting blood into the muscle. So I'll do like a cable fly where it's not really going to fatigue me that much, but I still get a bunch of blood flow into there and it's beneficial. And I'm still taking those sets to failure or past failure.
So I was going to say that as well. Like another thing you could literally just do is the seated cable fly first. And, it's going to be easier to connect with that. And then you could go into a movement that requires more stabilization. But the argument for that would be is, why would you do a cable or a chest fly first when it doesn't, produce as much mechanical tension or whatever as the, the dumbbell press, as the pressing movement? People always make that argument. Why would you ever do a fly before you do a press because of that? And I just do it by feel, really. Some days I want to do it. Some days, I'll just start with the press. I think it's really not as fucking deep as people try to make everything. Nothing is really as deep as people try to make it. But how do you feel about that, doing, flies before a press?
It's really not going to cause that much fatigue. Even taking 1, 2, or 3 sets as far as it can go, you just take an extra few minutes to rest before you go into your dumbbell pressing. And then even then you're still warming up doing your feeder sets before you actually get into your top sets. You're not going straight from doing a double drop set on cable flies straight into a top set on dumbbell press. You have time to catch your breath, to allow your central nervous system to recover, to let the blood flow into the muscle. And
I think people are just very concerned with, the fact of, if I do a chest fly first, I might not be able to press as much. And I have personally never found that to even be the case, really. I don't think if it's ever affected that. And also, I don't think it doesn't even really matter. If that's something you're going to consistently stick with as well, that's just, your pattern, right? You're doing chest flies first, you're doing incline press second. Exactly. The fact that you could do more weight if you did it first is really irrelevant to the fact you're still going to failure. You're still bringing the same amount of mechanical tension by doing that. People are we're at the point where people are confusing bodybuilding with powerlifting, and they're so focused on, I need to go as heavy as I possibly can for this movement. I need to make it first, when it doesn't matter as long as you're still going to failure.
Right. And if your goal is really just to get the most amount of load on the muscle, like if you're really trying to get the 105s instead of the 100s on dumbbell press, but you're doing it first, you might be not getting a full range of motion, you might be not controlling the eccentric, and you might be sacrificing your execution a little bit just to get that heavier load, when really you should have the mindset of, I'm trying to cause as much of a stimulus in the muscle as possible. And in that case, if you're able to still take that set as far as it can go, and you're still able to progress week to week, session to session on that second movement, with having cable flies first, then it is totally fine to do it that way. You're not hindering your progress by doing cable flies before your chest, before your dumbbell press. But if, let's say, you were doing something very fatiguing, let's say you're doing a barbell press and then dumbbell press, you're probably not going to be as strong on that dumbbell press. But still, again, just take a little bit more rest time. You're probably still gonna be able to progress. And yeah, it's very simple when you just do it instead of thinking too hard. I've been doing it for a long time. I've been doing the cable flies before dumbbell press, and my dumbbell press have just been continuing to go up and up and up, and my chest's been getting bigger. So the proof is in the pudding. I mean, if it works, it works. And if you like doing your dumbbell pressing first, then do it that way.
People make the argument though that just because you do it doesn't mean it works for everybody. When the case is that like it's not just Adam that does it, it's fucking thousands of other people. You know, it's like the argument of I did it so it works isn't a valid argument. But if it's, you know, thousands of people have done it and it works, that's the fucking argument. Whether or not, you know, whatever you read on paper might contradict that, there's more that goes to it. And if we've seen it work, you know, time and time again with so many fucking people, obviously it's not as simple as whatever you're fucking reading, you know. But yeah, that's why I do.
Well, you got to try everything, really see what works best for you. And that's what I found works best for me. I'm still able to go heavy on my dumbbell pressing, and I'm still able to progress. So that's what works best for me. For some people, they just don't want to do it that way. Maybe it's even just mental. Maybe they just think, oh, because I just first exercise in the workout, I want to put everything into that exercise, and I'm only doing cable flies, and then I'm doing dumbbell pressing, I feel like I'm not able to go as heavy. And it could just be
I think specifically when we're talking about pressing, like I think doing flies is always better. Even like I said, like even if you want to do it your way, like where you're doing like the actual, you know, working sets, that's your first movement, that's fine. But even like the way that I'm doing it with activation, because I just feel like once you have blood flow and you're focusing on that, I feel like you get more out of the press. Even if whether or not that's the first actual movement or the second one, I think doing that initial movement before driving that blood in there, getting that down, I always feel like I get more to the press rather than if I just go straight into pressing.
Exactly.
Because it's all about executing with intent.
Exactly. That's the reason why I do it, is to get more blood flow into the chest and into the shoulders and the elbows and everything, just so that I can feel a better mind muscle connection on my actual dumbbell pressing and get a good contraction in it after getting blood flow into it. I just happen to make those actual working sets instead of just a warm up, but there's no one right way to do it. So yeah, it's the exact same reasoning.
It's like how I want to point out, like people know I do hack squats at the end of my workouts, at the end of my quad days usually. Sometimes, most of the time I do. Obviously, there's been times where I don't. There's plenty of times where I don't program it like that. But the reason why I do that is, for one, you know, talk about the stim to fatigue ratio, is because, you know, with the amount of, first, I mean, obviously, this is all relevant to what we were saying before with how strong you are and whatnot. The amount of weight that I lift on a hack squat, it puts me out. You know, like there's plenty of times where I'm going to throw up. Like because I push myself probably harder than I should on hack squats, because I probably shouldn't be throwing up as fucking often as I should. But if I do hack squats at the beginning, you know, the rest of the workout is shot for me. You know, I fucking just feel like I cannot put anything else into, you know, leg extensions, leg press. Like I just want to go home. I'm tired. My head hurts. Like if I save it for the end, you know, it's a great way to just finish the workout, because I could just go home after that. I feel like that I go home. But even with me doing them in the beginning and with me doing them at the end and doing all the prior movements, doing leg extensions, leg press, hamstring curls, whatever, before I do hack squat, and I'm able to put maximal effort into those without so much fatigue and just absolutely, you know, murder my legs, I still am just as strong at the end for hack squats. I'm never weaker. There's never a difference whether I do them beginning or at the end. And I think it's just because of, you know, those exercises just generally just don't even cause as much demand on the body. Right. So it's like, you know, obviously, you know, the exercise we're talking about all depends, but I'm talking about hack squats specifically, or, you know, maybe barbell squats or whatever. But I think when you're doing less demanding movements before doing the more demanding movements, it's not going to have a huge impact on those. It might have a slight, it might have a minor, but I don't think it's ever anything like significant. Like I'm not going to go from, you know, hack squatting 6 plates in the beginning workout to only being able to do, you know, like 4 at the end. Maybe I'll do 5 1/4, maybe. Like it says, right. But at the end of the day, it still doesn't fucking matter if I'm going to failure. It's just, you know, something I don't think it has a major effect on it.
Because you're doing the compound movements after the isolation movements, you're able to put everything into the isolation movements, which isn't really going to hinder your compounds. Versus if you're doing your compounds first and those are extremely taxing on you, that's probably going to hinder the isolation.
Yeah, it hinders. So you ultimately get less out of the workout by doing it that way. Yeah, because you know, I'm talking about mechanical tension now, you know, if I can't put everything into leg extension and leg press and hamstring curls or whatever after I do hack squats, you know, the workout is less effective now because I'm so fucking fatigued from doing that in the beginning, rather than being able to bring all of those exercises in the beginning, doing them to failure, producing the most amount of mechanical tension, getting the most out of them, and then still able to do that with hack squats at the end, finish off, go the fuck home, go to bed.
Exactly.
So that's why I like to do that specifically with that, but that's just one way to go about it, you know? And with that being said,
I do it in the middle. I put my hack squats in the middle because I like to do some stuff before to get some blood in my knees and in my quads, get my central nervous system primed and ready to go, and to just get some stuff out of the way. And then I do my main compound movements for leg day. And then after, I am pretty fucked in the head, but I'm probably going to do 1 or 2 more isolation movements and then be done, whether it's like hamstring curls and adductors or both, maybe quad extensions after if I did hamstring curls first.
Well, obviously it comes into play how hard you're actually training. And I'm a huge advocate of training to failure. I think you are too. But, obviously, I could limit the amount of fatigue if I just do, that hack squat and I leave 2 to 3 reps in reserve. And on paper, right, that's going to produce the same amount of hypertrophy, right? I think that's bullshit. I don't buy that at all. I think obviously, it's all goes hand in hand, right? If I'm able to leave those 3 reps in reserve and do that as my primary movement, and then I get more out of the rest of them, then yeah, sure. Like overall, like it's better, right? But if I'm able to do all those movements to failure, I think that's obviously, brings the best results at the end of the day. I think going to absolute failure always brings the best results. And I know there's a lot of these science guys that argue against that. And on paper, it says, whatever, there's no difference between 2 reps in reserve and failure. And you shouldn't really go to failure because, it just causes more fatigue. And I think that's just another code word for saying I'm a fucking pussy and don't want to train hard. But what do you think?
I think there's a lot of things that go into it. And the main ones would be the fact that training to failure and reps in reserve is subjective, and it's very hard to measure that. And most people think if they have 2 reps left in the tank, they really have 6 left in the tank, or like more than they.
So we obviously know, judging reps in reserve is very, very hard. It's very hard for a lot of people, especially when it comes to training legs, because it's a mental battle. Legs is a mental battle. I see it all the time. I see it with Marissa all the time when she trains legs. Like, people will think, oh, I have 2 more. And it's like, I could tell you right now, you have 10 fucking more. My clients, I don't know, your clients send you, training evaluation videos, right? And they'll be like, a top sit to failure. And I'm like, a lot of times it's like, you had fucking 5 more reps. Like you had 15 more reps than you. Like, I guarantee it. Like the concept of failure is so misconstrued. But let's say hypothetically somebody has they understand failure. They know they could judge reps in reserve accurately. How do you feel about person making, the decision to not go to failure and instead always leave, these reps in reserve and minimize failure in order to minimize fatigue?
It really comes down to recovery ability. And there's a lot of things that play into recovery, obviously. So there's a large component of it is genetic. So some people can just genetically produce more proteins and recover faster. Then there's, of course, the lifestyle attributes. So there's your diet, there's your sleep, there's your stress levels.
What do you do every day?
Yeah, basically.
Are you on your feet? Do you
exactly. So there's those that play into recovery, and then of course your training split, and then your training volume. So all these things play into the actual recovery abilities. So if your recovery abilities are not as good as they could be, or not as good as somebody else's, you can't train as hard as someone who has a better recovery ability. However, you can improve your recovery ability, and that's the thing that people miss, is they think that their recovery ability is stagnant. They can't get better at recovery, and so they have to limit their training over time.
Yeah, and I can't recover, so I just need to do less volume or only train at RP 8 or fucking leave 2 reps in reserve because I can't recover from going to failure, instead of actually focusing on how can I get better, how can I recover better,
and training harder. And if you can train harder, and I say this all the time, if you train harder and recover from it, you're going to build more muscle. So you need to focus on improving both to just build more muscle. So that's the main thing that people miss, is the recovery. So when it comes down to should people ever train with 2 reps left in the tank, I mean, sometimes I think there is a case for it. There's certain situations, let's say you're getting back into the gym, which we could cover that. If you're getting back in the gym after being sick or after deload, whatever it is, and you have a decreased training tolerance, then yes, you wouldn't want to be training.
It's just, I know it's such like a broad question because there's so many things that go into it. Like it could make sense on certain things. Like let's say like I want to do 3 straight sets of fucking 8 to 10 reps and I want to use this weight. Okay, like I'm going to want to use a weight where I don't go to failure on the first one. I have a few reps left in the tank, so I could continue to use that for the following 2 sets and eventually be a failure at the last one, right? So it's just like it all depends on like what you're programming around and like fucking what you're really trying to accomplish within the workout. But I think by the end of like in the general sense, in like the end of most, if you're having multiple working sets or if you're only doing one working set, by the end of that working set, where it's one or the third one, no matter how many you're doing, you should be reaching failure.
Well,
Absolute
definitely.
failure.
And I also think people don't know what they're actually capable of. And you never know what you're capable of until you actually try. So if people continue to either train with 0 to 1 or 1 to 2 reps in reserve or even 3 all the time and never train a failure or rarely train a failure, or they have a method of periodization which has become pretty popular where they're doing a block of, let's say, 5 weeks or 4 weeks, whatever it is, where they're doing 3 RIR, 2 RIR, 1, and then a failure week, and 1 week of failure, and then they take a deload, and then they're back up to 3 or 4 IR, and then they just keep repeating that. I did that for like 3 months, a long time ago, once I started kind of learning more about training, and I tried it out, and it made sense theoretically.
I don't do that.
No, it was terrible because I stopped. Yeah, exactly. And so what I realized is, well, what if I continue to train to failure? And after I did that failure week, I'm like, I don't want to take a deload. Like, what if I can keep training to failure? I don't need a deload.
What if I keep training at maximum capacity to produce the maximum results? What could possibly happen?
Exactly. And so then I realized I can train for weeks and weeks and months, training at as hard as I can and recovering from it because my recovery ability is as effective as possible. And then eventually, maybe like 3 or 4 months down the line, then I might need to take a deload or just take a few days out of the gym or take a week out of the gym, whatever it is.
So how do you, okay. Deloads.
Deloads. So it depends on a lot of things. This is a big
let's deload this conversation. How do you approach deloads?
So there's a time and place for deloads, and there's a time and place for taking days out of the gym or even a week out of the gym.
Well, technically, I think you know, what people will say is even if we're taking time off from the gym, it's still considered a deload because your training volume is considered, even though people like to say this shit and they say it just to sound smart when everybody knows what the fuck we're talking about, right? They just sound like a fucking retard to anybody that actually knows and has been around, you know. Well, technically, fucking taking a week off is a deload, like, obviously, but like, when somebody says a deload, like, nobody thinks of that. So I'm not going to fucking say that, right? It's just going to get lost and fucking misconstrued.
Yeah. Generally, a deload means you're still training
at like 50% capacity or something.
Yeah. So what I actually like to do for my deloads is a deload and a devolume, which not a lot of people refer to it as a devolume, but basically my goal when it comes to that, where training fatigue has gotten too high. And so think of it as like you build fatigue week to week and month over month. You build fatigue over time as you're increasing the stimulus of what you're doing in the long term, not just within, you know, each set or each exercise, but in the long term, you're slowly building fatigue from lots of factors, but training included. And eventually you get to a point where all these things are telling you you need to take a little break and pull back. So your training performance is not progressing, your joints are starting to hurt, you're mentally foggy and fatigued all the time, your digestion is off, your sleep is off, you're stressed out all the time. Maybe you need to take a little bit of stress off. And what is the thing that's causing the most stress in your life? Is it your work? Is it something else, like relationship problems? Maybe you don't need to take a deload. Maybe you need to fix those stressors. But if training is the stressor that's causing this large amount of stress in your body, then yes, you need to pull back a little bit so that you can continue to progress. One way to do it is if you're really just not enjoying training at all, just get out of the gym. Just stop training, develop that desire to train again, and you'll be fine. You're not gonna lose muscle in a week or even 3 days or 4 days. But if it's just the physical part, you're still wanting to train, but your joints are hurting and you're not progressing, whatever it is, then you can still go to the gym, just not at maximum capacity, and still allow yourself to recover without that large stressor from training. So the way that I like to structure deloads is I will take all of my sets, all my exercises, I'll do just usually one set. So a total of, let's say, 4 to 6 working sets per muscle per workout, or per week. And within each of those sets, I'm going to get rid of all intensifiers because we don't need large amounts of stressors in this period. And I'll leave about 2 to 3 reps left in the tank, which for me is hard to leave reps in the tank. I don't want to not train a failure. So I'll definitely decrease the volume because that's a large contributor of the stressor from training. And I'll just not push myself to the full out grinding out reps. I'm going to get to the reps to where I grind out a rep or two and that's it. I'm not going to grind out that extra 1, 2, or 3 reps. And I'm still training I'm training harder than a lot of people, but I'm not pushing myself to where I'm really just trying to go all out, and I'm doing less volume. And that will allow me to recover from that and then build from that new set point to where now I'm going to start to add in more volume and add in more effort within each set and build up from that resetted spot of a deload. That's the way I structure deloads.
Okay, so that's how you do deloads. So you never take days completely off.
But I do. If I just need an extra rest day, like tomorrow, I'm taking an extra rest day.
Because I feel like in terms of like, let's say you actually need a deload, like your fatigue is too high. I feel like just taking time off from the gym is just always more beneficial for your body in general. Like you're literally just you're not putting any stress on your body in terms of this physical stress, and you're just allowing yourself to recuperate and rest. And rather than trying to go in there and do something, even that 50%, effort, I think that's still, going to be somewhat counterproductive to really what you're trying to accomplish to an extent. No,
it can be, but here's at least one situation where I would rather take a deload than time off at the gym. Is let's say you're cutting, let's say you're doing a bodybuilding prep.
Well, yeah, of course, yeah.
But let's say you're not even close to the show. Let's say you're 10 weeks out.
Okay.
You're still cutting, and or maybe 8 weeks out, getting closer, you're getting leaner, and you're in a deficit. So obviously you're going to be depleting muscle glycogen. You still want to be forcing the muscles to absorb glycogen. And the way that works is exercise causes GLUT4 receptors to appear, and they absorb more glucose from the bloodstream into the muscle and store more glycogen. So that's a reason for doing pump work. This is just tangent. That's the reason for doing pump workouts before you do a show, like the last few days, is just to stimulate glucose absorption into glycogen. So you still want to use the muscles and store more glycogen and maintain your fullness and keep your calorie expenditure up and keep your metabolism up. So you still want to do something in the gym, but you don't want to be causing too large of a stress that you can't recover from. So that would be one example of when you'd want to do a deload instead of taking time off. I'm sure I could come up with other examples, but that's a really good one.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense in that context. But let's just say, somebody who's not fucking competing, or somebody who's in an off season.
Off season, yeah. In that case, generally in an off season, you might be better off taking time off, even if it's just an extra few days, not even a full week. But if let's say it's someone who's doing a powerlifting, this is not bodybuilding related, but let's say a powerlifting meet. Let's say if you want to be as strong as possible for a powerlifting meet, and that has largely to do with your central nervous system rather than.
Well, yeah, but so powerliftings, they that's where, like I said, with push-pull legs, I remember when I was younger, like the entire concept of the deloads came to me from powerlifting.
Definitely, me too.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. To keep your central nervous system used to those.
Yeah, and that aspect, it makes sense. But
right.
To me, it was always like, why would I come in here and just do 50% effort rather than just resting for a few days?
Yeah.
And then just feeling fully replenished, in an off season, in a growing phase or whatever. So I feel like, taking one step back could be 2 steps forward. But
yeah,
let's talk about, other than just fatigue, other than you might need a deload or time off. When would it make sense to take time off from the gym? Let's talk about when you're sick, right? A lot of people always ask, should I still train if I'm sick? How sick do I have to be to not go to the gym? And how do you feel about that? How should you approach training, diet, all that stuff when you are sick?
Well, it obviously depends. Like if you just have a little bit of allergies, don't be a pussy. But if you feel like you're starting to get actually sick, you feel like an actual cold is coming on or something worse, like flu, and you feel like you're actually starting to get sick, don't place that larger stress on your body and cause yourself to get even more sick.
Mm-hmm.
I would at least, if you're just feeling like you're starting to get sick, just take a rest day. A rest day is not going to kill you. It's just only going to help you. And if you continue to get sick, if you are getting more and more sick, I would say it's completely counterproductive to train. There are certain contexts where I would say you might want to train. And I know someone who did this and it makes sense. So I know someone that just competed at the Olympia, and every day at the Olympia got sick. And she wanted to train right after the show to maximize her reverse diet and to put on muscle, obviously, because she just wanted to train more food in her. And she's always like, imagine a women's physique competitor at the Olympia. She's just, she's gonna be hard headed and she's gonna fucking know how to just train hard. So she's not gonna let a little bit of sickness pull her away from training, and she's just gonna train hard no matter what. Is that going to prolong the sickness? Is that going to negatively affect her training? Potentially, but in that context, she's going to do what she wants. But for majority of people, especially if you're just in an off season, just don't train until, I would say, 2 days after you stop being sick, just to make sure that you don't have anything lingering.
Yeah.
And
I don't think people understand that, like, if you are pushing yourself when you're sick, you're just going to make it worse. You can't just like fight the sickness. Same thing goes with food, like you're in off season, you're pushing food. If you're sick, stop pushing food. That doesn't mean like stop eating, but like you don't need to be pushing food and forcing food down when you're sick, back off of food. That's just going to make it worse too. Because what is it? Your immune system, a majority of the immune system is in your gut, right? So your fucking immune system is already, being attacked here. So you're just gonna put more stress on yourself by trying to constantly force food down. It's gonna fuck with your gut more. The more you fuck with your gut, the more it's gonna fuck with your immune system. And this is why if you're pushing a lot of food, which is given in an off season for most people.
Yeah,
for most people. So that doesn't mean that, maybe just come down to like maintenance. I'm not saying like go into a deficit, stop eating, but just come down. Obviously, eat foods that you can easily digest, is not causing digestive stress, and just give your body a break, rest. Don't try to don't stress over not going to the gym. Just relax, let your body do its thing. And this is also, like I said, your immune system's in your gut, all that stuff. So if you're sick and you're really sick, you're taking antibiotics and shit. That's why people take probiotics after you take antibiotics. Like you should always fucking fix your gut after you put that shit in your body. Same things like oral steroids, obviously. But when you get sick, that has an effect on your gut microbiome. So
yeah, and that's why I'm generally a large proponent of, when someone is sick, just eating what they can and drinking more like shakes and smoothies, things like that, just to at least get enough protein in.
Yeah, get protein in.
Get your protein in and get your micronutrients in, and that's the most important thing when you're sick. In special cases when you do have to take an antibiotic for whatever the reason is, you have an infection or something. A case for that would be to eat a lot of fiber after, so that you have prebiotics in order to grow the bacteria, as well as probiotics in order to grow the bacteria that you already have. But prebiotics are pretty important also, which is just. But yeah, that's generally my protocol. Whenever someone says they're sick, I'm going to tell them to get out of the gym, to not do their cardio, not exert themselves, literally just keep yourself in a parasympathetic state as much as possible. Allow yourself to give yourself the nutrients that you need in order to facilitate the cells that need those extra nutrients in order to get better. And that's, I would say, more important in a cutting phase. If you're cutting, I'm probably going to bring your calories up, depending on obviously how much of a deficit you're in, whatever your diet is. But I might end up bringing the calories up just so that they're not in as severe of a deficit, because that's also a stressor on their digestive system and on their immune system and their body in general. So I might bring them up to maintenance depending on the situation, and that'll give them enough calories in order to get over being sick and for their cells to utilize in order to get better.
Yeah. So, whatever the case is, you're sick, taking a deload, you're taking time off from the gym. Let's talk about how do you get back in?
How do you get back into the there you must
Yeah. You already beat me to it. How do you approach training coming back into the gym? Because obviously, I haven't trained almost 5 weeks now, right? So that's a perfect example. I'm not going to get into why and all that stuff. We'll talk about another podcast. You guys that follow me, you already know. But going back into the gym for me, or anybody, even if it's just a week, you're not going to be able to go straight back in, full capacity, right? So let's talk about that. How do you approach getting back into the gym after taking some time off here?
Generally, I would just say set a baseline to progress from. But a lot of people don't necessarily understand what I mean by that, and they think just train like a baby when you first get back in and then progress from there, which all that's doing is wasting time and wasting energy, more specifically wasting time. Because if, let's say, I'll just throw out random numbers. Let's say you're normally going to bench 200 pounds and you get back into the gym and now you're taking it very easy because I said just set a baseline, and you're going to bench 100 pounds. And you're slowly going to work your way up by 10 pounds, 10 pounds, 10 pounds. It's going to take you 10 weeks to get back up to 200 pounds. These are obviously abstract numbers, but If I say to set a challenging baseline, now that means something a little bit different. Okay, so now maybe you're going to start with 170 pounds, something that you can do and something that you can recover from, but is challenging enough to where now the next week you're doing something that's challenging again, and you're going to get back to your normal numbers sooner. So I would start with something that's similar to a deload, basically. So a deload is another way to look at it if you're getting back into the gym, is just to set a baseline to progress from, and start at something with, let's say, 2 or 3 reps left in the tank. You don't need to train as hard as possible. Same with taking a deload. You don't need to do a bunch of volume. You want to focus on keeping the volume shorter and smaller, and then building that up over time.
Yeah, just getting back into the routine of doing the movements, adaptation, all that stuff. Make sure everything's good. Just not really trying to push yourself too hard. And you might get,
and you won't be able to recover from it. You're gonna be out of the gym just because you're sore and tired and fatigued for another 3, 4, 5 days, and you just want to slowly build up that momentum so that you can get back into training at full force within 1 to 3 weeks.
Yeah, people become I feel like we've already gone this a bunch of times, but people become so hyper focused on the numbers. So I think, people take a week off from the gym and they were like, okay, before I was, the week before I took off, I was doing 100 pounds for 10 reps on incline dumbbell press. So I got to go do that again now that I'm back. I keep up with my progressive overload, the rate that I was at. But realistically, like, you should probably go in and, maybe work with like 70s or 80s that first week. And then maybe, depending how that feels, bump up to 90s or 100s the next week if you feel all good, if you feel, completely fine. But you shouldn't just jump straight back into that right off the bat.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that makes sense for people, is just to not train like a baby, but not train like a maniac. Just do something that's challenging that you can actually do and recover from. And then that way you can get back into the gym the next day and then, slowly work your way back up.
I want to talk about this with Ryan when Ryan comes on here. Should probably be like in a couple episodes from when I talked to him, but intensifiers, rest pause sets, drop sets, supersets, cluster sets. A lot of guys say, straight sets or superior, I know you don't like that. I know I don't like that. Let's talk about it. What do you have to say?
Well, what does superior mean? In my opinion, if you're saying that a straight set is superior to a rest pause set, that means it's going to cause more of a stimulus. I would disagree. Or you could also say it has a better stimulus to fatigue ratio. It obviously depends on the exercise, but generally I'm going to say I disagree. Or
you're not, obviously, like, it doesn't make sense to do a rest pause set on every exercise. You're not going to do a rest pause set. You do rest pause sets on exercises that are easy to set up, like a press, a curl, a cable machine. Like,
generally a machine or a curl is where I'm going to do an intensifier. I'm generally not going to be doing an intensifier on a free weight movement. Maybe a drop set or double drop set on a movement, but
you don't ever want to, I don't know if anybody like doesn't understand this yet, but you don't want to do rest pause sets on things where like you have to unrack something, or like it takes like after like kick dumbbells up. Like you don't want to, because that's just going to cause a lot more fatigue to even do that movement efficiently throughout that rest pause set, right? I don't want to unrack a bench, have to get into position. I could do it on Smith machine, because Smith machine I'm just pressing, getting down. Machine, I'm just pushing up, it's racked there. Cable curl, I'm just putting it down, picking it up. Something that's very easy to set up, and there's not, a process like walking it out of a rack or whatever like that.
Right. But when it comes to just in general on a machine chest press, saying that doing straight sets are superior to doing rest pause sets or double drop sets or cluster sets or force reps, whatever it is, I would say there is a time and place, not just for fun. And if your goal is to develop the best physique possible, then you do not want to be avoiding intensifiers. That is stupid to do that, because you're leaving gains on the table that you could be doing. If you can train harder, and I said this before, I've said it many times, if you can train harder, aka if you can do intensifiers and recover from that level of a stimulus, you will build more muscle. Don't get sucked into the fact that your recovery sucks and you can't improve your recovery, or the other way to think of it is getting doing the least amount possible in order to see results from. Having a minimalist mindset, that's going to show in your physique as well. So if your goal is to, I only have to eat this much protein to build muscle, I only have to train with this amount of effort in each set, that is
you're going to get minimalistic fucking results.
Exactly. And that's not how you be competitive. That's just not how you be competitive, especially as a bodybuilder. And that's not how you be as successful as possible in your career, whatever it is, bodybuilding, whatever it is.
And people are going to say that working harder isn't working smarter, though. That's what they're going to say to that.
Working harder, it depends. So if let's say, okay, so the actual example of doing 3 sets, all straight sets of 8 to 12 versus 3 sets, 8 to 12, and that last set you're doing a rest pause set instead of just stopping it at 8 reps.
Sounds like a fucking no-brainer to me.
I know.
It's a no-brainer. It's a no-brainer.
Because you're able to do more. And that's not going to negatively impact you the rest of the workout, depending on the exercise. Obviously, if you're doing it in the smart way and you're training smart, and intensifiers can be used in a smart way, I would say it is smart to incorporate them into your training for multiple reasons. I'm speaking in terms of if you're training optimally as a bodybuilder that knows what you're doing. But let's say you're someone who's been training for 1 to 5 years, 1 to 3 years, somewhere in that range, and you think you know how to train to failure. Maybe you do know how to train to failure, but failure is also relative. Because what if someone had a gun pointed at your head and was saying, hey, you need to get another rep, you're going to get another rep. So you can generally do a little bit more than what you think you can. And so what intensifiers allow you to do is to see more of that capability that you actually have in you, because humans are so resilient. Humans are capable of so much stuff and can recover from crazy things. So
like I said, you know, like with Marissa, like she'll squat, and I always fought her when she squats because I've seen her do, you know, weight, and she'll do like 12 reps. And I'm like, that's failure. And she's like, yeah. I'm like, there's absolutely no fucking way. And I'll literally throw on like 20 more pounds. And somehow, even with that 20 more pounds, I'm getting her to do like 15 more reps. Obviously, that's an extreme example because she just really doesn't know. But then even, you know, you have clients send, you know, videos and stuff like on leg press, like they'll just go, and then they just rack it. I'm like, why did you rack it? Like you could have, you know, sit at the top for a second, you know, sit there for 2-3 seconds, attempt another rep, keep doing that until you literally cannot do it. And then they'll send me another video the next week and they got fucking 8 more reps doing it that way, you know, like.
Right. So intensifiers allowing that exact example. When I give a training program, I'm going to put more intensifiers in my training programs than if I were to just be training that person in person. Generally, I mean, who knows? But I like to put a lot of intensifiers in my training programs in general, just because
you know the person's going to push harder. They're going to get closer to failure. Like you can't always, with a straight set, you don't always know whether it's with a client or with like a program that I just dropped. There's no way to know if this person's actually going to push themselves to failure. But if I put a rest pause set in there, there's a much more likely chance that person's at failure by the end of that rest pause set.
And causing enough of a stimulus on the muscle within that entire set of the whole rest pause versus just stopping it at that eight reps. They can extend that set, and it really could just be a mental thing. Like, okay, maybe they're scared on a hack squat to hurt their knees, or they're scared because the muscle hurts or whatever it is, and they don't have pain. So maybe they just need a few extra seconds, even turning it into a myo rep set where it's not like a full-on rest pause with long rest times, shorter rest times, and they just need a few extra seconds just to catch the breath, just to mentally be okay, I'm fine, my joints are fine, whatever, and then go again rather than just stopping the set right there. And they can extend the set and actually get closer to failure. And
right now you realize we're talking in the context of people who don't understand failure, right? We're like assuming these people can't train hard, right? Okay, which is a lot of people, you like, that is the case. That is the majority case, where they're like, a lot of people lie to themselves. Like I could guarantee you like 90% of the people watching this probably do not train as hard as they think they can. And it's just the reality that a lot of people refuse to accept. But let's talk in the context of somebody like me or you, or like other bodybuilders, anybody, you know, who just knows how to actually train hard to failure, right? So like, let's talk about comparing like doing straight sets to a rest pause set there. If you could still, you know, we're going to failure at that 8 to 10 reps on straight sets, and we're still going to failure on a rest pause set, you know, but the rest pause set's obviously inducing more fatigue. We're still getting more out of it, more of a stimulus. You know, why are people saying that straight sets are superior?
Well, different answer. The reason why is just because it's inflammatory and gets views, but the actual opinion of it, let's take me for example. If I know how to train to failure and I do a whole chest workout of, let's say, 10 working sets to failure, I could probably have done more in that training session. I probably could have caused more disruption in the muscle proteins, caused more of a stimulus on the muscles, and I probably could have done more and still been able to recover from it. So if I could have done more and still recover from it, I would build more muscle. So that's the logic behind it, is if I could have done more and still recover from it. And then a counter argument would be, well, if you could have done more, then you could have just put more into each set. But this is assuming that each straight set I'm taking as far as it can go. I'm taking my time. Mentally, I am wanting to destroy myself as hard as possible. I'm grinding out those reps. and taking the straight sets as far as I can go. Even let's say even I'm doing some force reps. I can't even get the last rep, and someone's helping me get the last 1, 2, 3 reps. What if I can do more, which I probably can do more, and I can just rest another 10, 15 seconds and then go again, get another 3 to 8 reps, and then rest 10, 15 seconds again and get that again.
Force reps are great.
I literally was doing them
great when you're fucking.
I had a crazy yesterday.
You need a good training partner. You know, when I would train with Wadi, he would have me do Wadi pushed me hard. I love training with Wadi. He would make me do like crazy shit. And he would put like fucking 365 on an incline bench. And like, he's like forcing me to do like 6 reps, 6, 7, 8 reps with this shit. And he's like helping me up. And there comes a point where it's like, I don't even know if I'm moving this weight, but like, I know I'm moving this weight because I know that Wadi's nowhere near strong enough to fucking upright row this. So it's just like that force rep, it causes so much damage. You know, you just feel like insane afterwards, you know, it really just fucking,
well, it really
breaks down the fucking tissue in a whole nother level. But obviously you can't do that if you don't have a good training partner. So it's not even an option if you don't, but
if you don't have a good training partner, it's still just important. So the purpose of a force rep is just to get more out of the set by loading the eccentric more or getting more eccentric reps.
Yeah.
And so if you don't have a training partner and you can't do force reps, then still you should try to control the eccentric as much as possible and load the eccentric as much as possible, and maybe even get partials, because the eccentric portion of the movement, you're going to be stronger than the concentric portion, and force reps are the exact proof.
Well, you want to be controlled in your eccentric in a timely, you know, manner. You don't want to go too slow.
Well, no, because that'll just take away from the movement itself.
A lot of people will hear that. A lot of people hear, you know, go slow on the eccentric, go slower on your movements, like control, and then they end up going too slow. I don't think people realize that when you go slower movements, you literally have less muscle fiber activation from that. If you go too slow, if you have like a slow contraction, you go super slow, you get less out of it, you know? So I just want to point that out there, guys. Don't do fucking 10-second eccentrics and a fucking slow contraction and think that's controlled, you know?
Think about it from an evolutionary standpoint. So if you, even let's say you're throwing a punch, if I'm going to throw a punch, I'm probably going to be pretty angry. I'm probably going to be pretty fired up. Yeah. And my nervous system is going to be, you know, working a lot faster. It's going to be in more of a sympathetic state. So I'm going to be able to recruit more motor neurons, which innervate muscle fibers. That's a motor unit, motor neuron plus muscle fiber. So I'm going to be able to recruit more motor units, more higher threshold motor units that you don't generally tap into just for day-to-day activities. And so if you're able to turn that on, that aggression on, or that speed on, whatever it is, you're able to use more motor units and more muscle fibers, and therefore cause more damage on the muscle in total. So that's the reason for being explosive on the concentric, is if you're only going so slow, you're not tapping into those higher threshold motor units, and you're not causing as much total disruption in the entire muscle versus if you were being explosive. And then that goes hand in hand with being too slow on the eccentric, is you're wasting energy, and 2, you're going to be slower mentally. You're not going to be able to be as aggressive with it on the concentric as possible. But of course, that's just generalizing. Of course,
well, I think people used to do that. It was a lot more common a couple of years ago because people would hear, you know, time under tension and think if I just go super slow, you know, more time under tension, you know, better results. That's not how it works.
Not really.
I don't do a lot of supersets though. Do you do a lot of supersets?
Only time I ever do is with arms.
I'll do it with calves.
I used to. When I used to train calves, I don't train calves anymore. They just grow by themselves. But
it's literally opposite end of the spectrum. Just fucking calves from walking.
Literally, they do.
Yeah, literally.
My arms definitely started growing more once I started well, there's a lot of things I started doing, so I can't just blame it on supersets. But that's one thing I started doing was supersetting. And the logic behind it is just because your bicep training, one, isn't going to be very taxing on your central nervous system, same with your triceps. So doing one set and then taking a few seconds to rest and then going into the next set of triceps is not going to really hinder that second set of the superset. But also, since they're in basically the same area, same idea as supersetting, like your front delts with your side delts with your rear delts, is just getting, or even your calves with your anterior tibialis, you're just getting more blood flow into that entire area, and just more localized blood flow into that entire, area of the arm, area of the humerus. So that's the logic behind it. Just more blood flow in that entire area, swell up the muscle, sarcoplasmic hypertrophy, stretching the fascia.
Literally the same concept as FST7.
Well, yeah, I mean that's what sarcoplasmic
People always ask about FST7, and I don't think people realize it's not like this crazy thing. It's very similar to other intensifier concepts. It just has its own name to it.
Yeah, it's just a way to get a really good pump and force a bunch of blood into the muscle. The idea isn't original. It's just a way to achieve that same goal that basically getting a pump is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, people say the pump isn't relative to hypertrophy.
And okay, so that's another thing that a lot of people say is the pump doesn't matter. The pump doesn't affect hypertrophy. And I think, and this is not something that a lot of people say.
I think people talk about shit in the way that like it's not like we're actually talking about it. Like I think when people say it's like the same thing with the sensation thing, I think people are saying like the pump isn't relative because people will say it's all about getting a pump, but then they're getting a pump from like literally just like doing like fucking some crazy, just superset, super high volume, a lot of reps, and like they're not actually causing mechanical tension to an extent. They're just focused on just driving blood. And in that aspect, yeah, like the pump does not like drive hypertrophy. But if we're actually doing like actually training how you should fucking train, you should have the goal and intent of getting a pump within that, right? So I'd go on with what you're saying.
Yeah. So, I mean, I completely agree with that. And to add on to that, yeah, if you're only training for a pump and you're not focused on heavily loading the muscle, you're not taking it to failure, you're not training it hard with heavy loads, with enough volume as well, then just getting a pump isn't really going to cause much change over time. But it can be a tool to assist and facilitate the actual progressive overload. So I also think that's not something that people generally want to say is it matters more for people who are enhanced. If you're enhanced, you can pump the muscle up a lot more with a lot more blood and a lot more growth factors. You have a lot more androgens in your blood. You have a lot more growth factors, and so it affects you even more if you're enhanced. But it's not that it doesn't affect you if you're natural. It's just you're not going to see the crazy benefits of adding, pump training and training as hard as possible in terms of like as many reps as possible and forcing blood into the muscle. You're not going to see the crazy benefits of doing that if you're natural. But I do still think if you're natural, training for a pump is going to help you if you're training with progressive overload. So what I mean by that, and the way to actually explain that is, let's say if you're training chest, or really any muscle, and you're heavily loading the muscle, you're taking it to failure, and you're doing enough volume in order to cause enough stimulus on the muscle, and you're breaking down the muscle proteins, causing disruption in the muscle proteins, and therefore signaling for all the downstream pathways to signal for hypertrophy. If you expand the muscle fascia, you push blood into the muscle, and this blood has the growth factors, the testosterone, the amino acids, the glucose, all these things that go into the muscle and help with hypertrophy. You're basically helping with hypertrophy. That's basically what I'm saying is You need to do the bread and butter of training heavy and training hard, and getting a pump is going to help build more muscle.
The pump should always be a byproduct of doing that.
Well, I mean, you're not really going to get that crazy a pump if you're doing like a heavy set of barbell squats for 6 reps. You're not really going to get that crazy of a pump. But if you're doing like a higher rep set of 12 on a hack squat, then yeah, you're probably going to get a pretty good pump.
But you'll accumulate a pump throughout the workout, regardless.
Well, yeah. I mean, yeah, of course. If you're using the muscle, you're going to be putting blood into it. But there's obviously a difference between having a little pump, like just having a little swelling in there, and having a fucking nasty pump.
Yeah. This is why all these kids use fucking Viagra.
You
do. You love it.
I haven't used it in a long time, and I used it yesterday because I was training with a friend, and my shoulder pump was absolutely insane. I had chest and shoulders, and it's crazy.
I don't use it. I just use Savage Code Sep, but I have used it before. I just never really gotten into the routine of using it consistently for training, just for other things that are more fun. But
yeah, I mean, I'm on a cruise right now, so I like using.
I haven't taken anything in fucking 5 weeks. Literally nothing. No injections.
Yeah.
Nothing.
But
since, like I said, I'll talk about all this on another podcast with what I've been dealing with, but basically what I think will be cool is, once I can train again, since I haven't taken anything, my diet has been shit. I haven't trained. It'll make for a good transformation because once I kick things back in, it's gonna be like that. I'm gonna blow up fast. Yeah. It's gonna be fucking crazy, like what I'll be able to do in just a couple of months, and it'll make for some good content. So that's a plus side. And usually when this happened when I was younger, when I was in jail and I couldn't train for 90 days, that time off, obviously, taking that much time off, I don't know if it was good for me, if it was bad for me, but I came back within that 4 or 5 months way better than I was before. So it'll be interesting to see what happens here. I'll pull a flex wheeler, fucking Kevin Lerbone. But
yeah, it'll be crazy.
But yeah, as we were saying, chasing the pump,
I think it's beneficial. I don't think we should avoid doing sets to train for a pump. Which what is training for a pump is basically doing a higher rep set, lower rest times, harder contractions.
How do you feel about the whole concept of flexing in between sets? I never really got into that.
I don't think it really has that much of an effect on your physique. I think it's more for the mind-muscle connection when you're posing.
I think that is something that actually, again, we come back to the same thing over again. That's another thing you could do if you struggle with, mind-muscle connection is, after doing your flies, whatever, sit there and just flex your chest, really, focus on that feeling, and that could help with that neurological connection. But that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to transfer into actual hypertrophy. But
no, it's more just like you're on stage and you have to be flexing every single muscle in your body for a long time, just practicing doing that and protecting every single muscle fiber in your entire body. Of course, the practice is going to help. So I think that's the main benefit.
Yeah.
With even more.
Okay. Before we end this here, because we've been on this for a while, let's come back to the splits here. Push-pull legs versus bro split are the main two splits. I don't even count Arnold split as a split because it's really just like Arnold split is kind of like a variation of a bro split in a sense. It's what it is. I did it when I was younger. I don't really like it. I don't like doing chest and back together. If it's like a secondary day on a bro split where it's like, chest is one day, back is one day, and that's like your secondary day for additional work, that's okay. But like doing it twice a week, I don't like to do that. I just feel like I can't bring enough attention to each muscle group by doing that twice a week. And then I also don't like doing shoulders with arms either. It's just a lot.
I do. I like doing shoulders and arms together.
Yeah. If you do, I don't, whatever. But
or shoulders and triceps.
Yeah, I'll do shoulders and triceps and shoulders and biceps. But another thing to say here is, what people say with bro split is like it's too much volume in a workout for them to do, when really it's not a lot of volume. I'm doing between 10 to 12 working sets in a session for a given muscle group, which is not a lot. It's not a lot. I don't know why people like this. The concept of what is high volume is so misconstrued. People don't understand, they think 12 fucking sets is, super high volume. It's not. It's because they're used to doing, fucking 4 or 6 sets on push-pull legs. And they say, I can't do that. I can't do that much volume. I get too burnt out. And what you understand is that that comes down to, like, first of all, to work capacity, right? You need to build it up to something. You might not be able to just go into what I'm doing right here. If you can't effectively do 12 sets, even though it's not a lot, it's definitely not a lot to me, coming from somebody who used to do 30 fucking sets when I first started training. I would just do crazy. I would do crazy high volume. When I started training, I would train with, old school bodybuilders, guys that were older than me. And we just went balls to the wall, like fucking 5 sets of squat to failure with 225. I can't even move it. He's picking me up. Like I'm throwing up throughout the workout, like just like underground intense fucking training. That's how I learned how to train. Obviously got me very far. And obviously I wouldn't really do that much now because it was just unnecessary, a lot of junk volume. But compare that to 12 sets now, it's fucking nothing, right? So, but these guys that start off with push-pull legs and they're only used to doing 4 or 6 sets, they jump to 12 sets and it's probably a lot for them. So what you need to understand is that you need to build work capacity. You can't just, you need to adapt to being able to do more. You might not be able to just jump into what I'm doing or what Adam's doing. You might need to, slowly increase your volume over time and see how your recovery is. Maybe it makes sense for you to do push-pull legs if you need to break up your volume more so that you're able to effectively do those workouts. But I don't believe that nobody can do a bro split and recover from it. I think you just might need to, adapt to it and work your way up if it's an issue for you to do, 10, 12 working sets for a given muscle group. And then another factor to a bro split is if like a lot of this doesn't apply to a lot of people unless you're at a certain level when it comes to prioritizing a muscle group. But, having a bro split designed where you can have the additional volume to focus on that is obviously going to give you more volume than you would be able to do on a push-pull leg split for trying to bring up, your chest or your back. Because what a lot of people seem to forget here is that when it comes to bodybuilding, you're sculpting your physique, right? So when we're trying to bring something up, we don't want to work everything at the same rate. How am I going to bring my back up if I'm working my chest, shoulders, and arms just as much as my back? Those kind of things need to be giving less attention to than your back. But yeah, I mean, I'm just going on a rant here, but I don't know if you even put it in.
Yeah, so you said work capacity, and that's another, I think that might be even a better way to say what I was saying, which is recovery abilities. So recovery ability mainly assumes that you're able to train really hard and you just aren't able to recover from it. But some people just aren't able to train that hard in that very moment. So a great analogy for it would be if you joined a new sport, you joined a football team, basketball, wrestling, swimming, whatever it is, and they're doing practices and they're doing drills that are way beyond your cardiovascular capacity and your endurance. But you're thrown into it and you do the first practice and it's way too hard for you. You can't do it.
Mm-hmm.
Do you just give up? Do you just say, I can't do this? I can't do this amount of volume, or I can't do this amount of this training, whatever it is? Or do you realize I need to get better and I need to get stronger? I need to get more endurance. I need to progress in some way in order to be able to handle this demand so that I'm a better athlete. That's what it really comes down to is
you want to be able to get to the point of being able to do more. You don't want to just hold yourself stagnant. Like, I can't do that, so I'm going to stay here and only stick with push-pull legs because, that's just too much for me, rather than making an effort to actually try to build up to that. So like you said, just, working up in a sport, it's like, with cardio, right? You're doing cardio in a prep. I might not be able to just go into being able to do the Stairmaster at level 10 for 45 minutes. I'm going to be fucking gassed. My heart rate's going to be 200 beats per minute. I cannot keep up with it. It feels like I'm dying. So I'm going to start at maybe level 6. Then, maybe after doing that for a week or two, bump it up to level 7. I get up to doing more so that now once I'm at level 10, I'm getting more out of this cardio session at the end of the day, but I had to build up to that, right? I couldn't just do it from the start. There's steps to it. You got to take the steps. You can't just jump right into something all the time.
Yeah, and you have to force yourself to adapt and get better at it. You can't just, assume that you're never going to get better and stay stagnant, because that's what a lot of people do with their training is they stay with their lower volume or higher volume and just lower effort in general, and they think that they can't train harder.
This works for me.
If you just push harder, if you just push yourself harder, do something that's uncomfortable, something that's scary, something that you have never done before, and you don't even think that you're capable of doing it, your body's going to be like, oh shit, what did you just make me do? And it's going to have to get better. You're going to force yourself to get better. And
so for example, say maybe you're like used to doing push-pull legs and you get onto a bro split, you get into a program now and, the workout is just too much for you somehow. It's too much, what would you do in that scenario? I would just taper down a couple working sets, modify it. And then, over time, maybe I add back in that additional working set. Maybe I add back in that intensifier, that rest pause set. But don't just, once you initially modify that to what you're able to do, don't just stay there, right? Try to be able to do more. And obviously, there's not an excessive amount. I'm not adding in a working set every single fucking week to the point where we're doing 20 working sets, but being able to do, at least, 10 to 12 or whatever the program calls for, if you have to modify it to bring it down to what you're able to do and then build back up to how it's written, right?
Right. Build up both your work capacity and your recovery abilities. And that's how you're going to be a better bodybuilder.
Sleep, eat, rest, repeat.
Take steroids. Yeah,
that's always an option. Fuck, I feel like we've been on here forever. Should we end this now?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a long time.
This is gonna be a long one. All right, guys. I think we're gonna call this the end of episode 1, Brass Tack Bodybuilding. This episode is probably a shit show. This is the first one. The camera died. Adam getting calls and stuff. So the next one will be better. I gotta, figure out how long this camera lasts and all that. But if you guys liked it, if there's any, any thoughts you have, anything you guys want to see us talk about on the next one, I'm gonna have Ryan come on. I know everybody keeps fucking asking about that, and we'll definitely be, pressing Ryan about his statements on the rest pause sets and straight sets, because I want to see what he has to fucking say about that. But yeah. Episode 1 complete. Hope you guys enjoyed it. It's a long one. We'll try to time the next one better. So I think this is like 2 hours. I don't know. Try to keep them around like an hour would be better. But yeah, until next time, see you guys later.
Yeah.